important for people to reflect and go back and say, do I have trust issues? What are they?
Yeah.
And then really you got to figure out where they started, because the only way to kind of break their power is to go back and figure out, not that you got to spend a lot of time digging it out or counseling, but it is important to go back and see where they started and rewrite the story. It sounds so cliche, but really our brains are like tape recorders, and you got to copy over that and copy over that, copy over that, and reprogram your mind and your brain.
So how do you not bring in your old baggages and biases?
Baggages?
Baggages.
Boxes and bags and packages.
No, I heard that in my head right when I said it. I guess not plural baggage. It's just baggage, right? It's not baggages.
I got baggages under my eyes. I am a product of the public school system. So
It's true. It's true.
So how do you...
Especially after you've been hurt. It can be a tricky one.
Yeah, not to carry all your baggages. I'm going to use that word
We're
from now
cutting
on.
that out.
No, we're going to keep
We
that
are
in.
cutting that out.
Baggages. Let's talk about my baggages.
That was a slip. That's the old brain right there. Weird things come out.
I don't know. I think it's going to be really intentional about not bringing in your crap into another relationship.
Well, I think you unintentionally do it as well. You may try to be intentional not to, but I think it still rears its ugly head from time to time.
That's what I mean. I think it just becomes like a part of you, right? And you bring those nuances and those behaviors in. So again, I think it goes back to when you're really trying to be self-aware and grow and change. That's an area that you really we all really have to look at, because it can be. I think it. I don't know this for a fact, but I definitely think it's probably one of the biggest reasons why torpedo a relationship.
Oh yeah. I mean, who wants to be in a relationship where you don't trust your partner and you're running around trying to play FBI agent behind their back every 5 seconds? I mean, that sounds like a miserable.
Yeah.
Miserable existence in a relationship.
Yeah, and I think trust isn't always just overt, like kind of really out in the open, in your face, like second guessing the person. I think it can be very subtle.
Oh yeah.
Too, it could show up as aggressive as, yelling at somebody if you think they've done something or are doing something they shouldn't be doing, and as gentle as not opening up.
Yeah.
Not opening up.
And it's impossible to build trust if you're not opening up, being vulnerable. And trust takes time too with a new partner, for sure.
So with that, what kind of baggages did you bring into?
You are never going to let me live that down.
I'm not. That's my new word. But if you think back, what are some of the things you brought in, do you think? I know a couple that you brought in.
Oh, you do? So this will be interesting, because off the top of my head, I feel like was pretty trusting. I'm pretty trusting of people until they show me otherwise.
I wouldn't say that you showed up in our relationship like not trusting me, but I think you showed up in a relationship carrying some behaviors that were born out of mistrust or lack of trust.
Oh, like what?
Money for first.
Psychoanalysis.
First of all, right?
Well, but aren't we sticking to trust right now?
That is. I mean, this whole trust isn't everything's kind of born around trust? Are we going to be? How am I going to show up on the topic of money? Am I going to be, was I going to show up? You didn't know this at the time. Was I going to show up as being an equal partner, and that it was going to be an open conversation, and that we were going to be able to, that it was just an equal. It was another equal part of our relationship, as opposed to, I think maybe some of the things you built mistrust around in the past, right?
Yeah. Well, like in going back to that, you're talking about being open and talking about it. I mean, that's what helps build trust. I know we keep beating this dead horse about communication, but that definitely took away some of the baggages. I can't stop saying it now. Some of the baggage that I packed into the relationship in that aspect.
Yeah, but I mean, so specifically going back to, I don't mean to be like throwing yours out on the table, because I certainly have ones that I showed up with, but you know, your mistrust of somebody else, the way they handled money or finances, that was a big thing for you, right?
Oh yeah, yeah. It's still like a touchy subject for me.
Mm-hmm. In what way?
I don't want to be drilled with this question.
No.
No, I don't know what to say about it, really. What?
I'm just trying to dig in here a little bit so we can start talking about specifics.
I don't really associate that money topic with trust.
Why not?
Too much. I just don't.
You should.
You got a secret offshore account I need to know about?
Yeah. It's offshore. It's underwater. It's at the bottom of the ocean. Yeah, I definitely think. I think I showed up in our relationship when we first met, having a lot of trust issues. Not directed at you, but we talk about bringing our past in. Yeah. I had a list, a litany.
Yeah.
And I think it was amplified or was exaggerated because I was so intrigued or enthralled or excited about our relationship and meeting you. And we didn't really have a relationship at the time. But
and you've opened up and said you've had multiple past relationships where trust was broken.
I didn't have multiple past relationships.
Multiple.
But yeah, there was a. I was like,
we need the English major to help us out here.
Did I tell you I went through the Pennsylvania public school system? Yeah, so I definitely think I kept everybody at kind of arm's length. It was interesting. We went to a wedding, you and I, a friend of mine that I grew up with forever. It was in Hawaii. It was a grand wedding, and I got to see some folks that I hadn't seen in a long time, since high school. Mm-hmm. And I was talking with a friend of mine that we graduated with and hadn't seen her in years and years and years.
Are you talking about your ex?
No.
Oh, I thought you were skirting around that.
No, we're sitting there talking, and we were talking about, we started getting this little deep conversation. I don't know if you remember or not, just about school and friendships and she had mentioned to me, I forget how the whole conversation went, but I felt like I was withdrawn or just dealing with some issues. She goes, no, you were great. She goes, you just kept everybody at arm's length. And that was like monumental, really impactful when she said that, because I think about, my years growing up in the household, and I'd shared a little bit about just the extreme dysfunction and fear, and so those trust issues or lack of trust, trusting your family to be one way and then not being that way. It built this mistrust, this core foundation of mistrust in me.
And that's what I mean when I said that you had a lot more instances. Yours, I think, started a lot younger. Like, I had a very strong, solid household to where trust was never an issue. Mm. And so really the only trust that I had broken was in my relationship with my ex-husband. Mm-hmm. So that was the one so it was from one person. So I think that's what I was saying when you had multiple. I just meant.
No, I'm not offended.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, but I don't really think it matters too much if that behavior started early.
Well, but I think if it kind of becomes a pattern in your life, you feel like it's a pattern, you're expecting it to come again. That's my point with that.
Yeah, I suppose so. You're already, for me, I already had my criteria. I already had my defenses up. So honestly, I wasn't showing up completely open. Interestingly, all throughout, my teenage years, when people typically start dating, and I don't want to say everybody has a boyfriend, girlfriend, but I never did. I hung out with a lot of people, went out with a lot of different girls, but I never had a steady girlfriend.
So was that you holding them at arm's length?
Yeah, absolutely. So it was a combination of it, because I think I rationalized, or in my mind, that if I start a relationship that's more than just casual or just not serious, then that means I'm going to end up having to bring them home. And then I'm going to have to meet my family, and then I'm going to have to see the conditions that I live in and all these things. And
so you get used to living in this guarded sense with relationships.
Yeah. Yeah, even when I started dating my former wife before we got married, I was always at her house or her mom's house, never at my house. So, yeah, it was just this core piece of who I was mistrusting. And we're here to talk about trust in a relationship, but it's important. The reason I'm talking about this, I think, is important for people to reflect and go back and say, do I have trust issues? What are they?
Yeah.
And then really you got to figure out where they started, because the only way to kind of break their power is to go back and figure out, not that you got to spend a lot of time digging it out or counseling, but it is important to go back and see where they started and rewrite the story. It sounds so cliche, but really our brains are like tape recorders, and you got to copy over that and copy over that and copy over that and reprogram your mind and your brain.
Yeah. I think I don't know if there's such a thing as being overly trusting, but I mean, you do put yourself out there to get hurt sometimes if you are overly trusting and you don't look at red flags. They're kind of waved in front of you. And where I had always had a sense of trust with family, a strong core, I never questioned red flags. I took someone's word for it. If I did question something, I took what they said about it as truth. And then, I kind of sometimes beat myself up about it now. I should have seen it sooner or done something sooner or been more proactive looking in, to what was going on. I teeter between, no, that's them and their choices. I shouldn't feel guilty for that. Between, I should have protected myself more.
Yeah.
So it's, yeah.
And the problem with trust, there's a lot of problems with mistrust, but for me it's kind of a two-prong, because if you have this core sense of, I just don't trust, I don't trust, I'm not going to necessarily trust somebody the first time they say something, or I'm not going to trust whatever. If you enter into whatever situation in life with this automatic hesitancy, mistrust, then when you do show up in a relationship, two things I saw happen in my life is you're on guard, so you're not willing to open up, and then that creates immediate issues with the other person, and then
you can't build trust like that.
Well, you can't, and then it starts to spiral downward, and then that is almost like a affirmation to your belief system that you're right. But then if you do open up and you try to take that extra step, and you feel vulnerable, then in the back of your mind, you're always looking for that other shoe to drop. So again, you're always on the defense. At least I was always on the defensive. So all those things just tend to embolden your belief system in distrust.
Well, that's
and you can't get out of that
like
vicious.
you said.
I say you can't get out of that vicious cycle, but you have to be intentional.
And you have to really look inward, like you said, and look back to the root of why you're not trusting people, and work through that, or you're going to damage a future relationship with a really good person.
Yeah, which is why it took me 7 years and took you 11 months or whatever.
Well, like I said, though, I feel like your trust issues ran a lot deeper than mine. I mean, I was with someone my whole life, my whole teenage and beginning of my adult life, so I only had that experience to draw from. So what are some ways that we can help
or not show up that way, or show up in a more positive manners or a manner to not bring your baggages in.
Well, I mean, you definitely don't want to ignore big, bright, huge red flags waving in your face, but you also don't want to nitpick every little thing and be looking for dishonesty necessarily. I still think you should give people the benefit of the doubt and trust that they're doing the right thing. And that's for me. That's just for me.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. Everything you said is spot on. For me, I don't see it. If we continue to repeat the same behaviors and fall into the same patterns, you can't expect anything but the same result in the past. And the sad thing about it is so many of us do. You know, we get into a relationship, starts out good, but because of this programming, self-program that we have in our belief system, it sabotages the relationship. And so for myriad of reasons, it falls apart, and you go through the hurt cycle, and you get back, and you just do it over and over and over. So for me, I think the only way I realized to break that cycle is to, outside of a relationship, do the work. Sit down, you know, whether it's with a trusted friend or whoever, or just yourself, and start trying to catalog all these things around. You know, what are the things in your past experience that have sabotaged a relationship?
Yeah.
And categorize. I mean, it almost sounds like mechanical or too diagnostic, but it really is. I mean, you got to understand what it is that keeps falling apart if you're going to be able to work on it and correct it.
Yeah. Well, and you have to show up in your relationship with consistency, honesty, of course, the basic element of trust, and be vulnerable with your partner too. Like I said, if the more you open up, the more they can open up, and that trust gets stronger.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So for example, if a person has an experience in their life where they were betrayed, let's just say, and it doesn't necessarily have to be, somebody cheated on them. It could be a betrayal of a parent, but betrayal comes in so many different forms and fashions. But if you feel like you've been betrayed by somebody that you really cared about and it hurt you deeply, then the next time you're starting a relationship, that needs to be a topic of conversation, right? And to your point,
because there might be small triggers that you're doing that triggers your partner that you may not even realize, and it's something that you all need to talk about and work through together.
Mm-hmm. Yep, and that's a good point. Even at a more foundational part, is you got to see if that person has the ability has the skills to communicate.
I lacked a lot of communicating skills when we met. You've really helped me come through and open up about a lot, because I was a stuffer for sure.
I think you were, and I think you're processing, and it goes back to the way you were raised. A lot of things necessarily weren't talked about. Not that there was a lot of bad issues, but maybe that just wasn't the environment. For me, I knew that it was just like oxygen for me. I had to be able to have the conversation. I had to be able to talk things out. I needed to know what was in your head, how you were feeling, how you were showing up. And it was always like that gauge, that litmus test to see how we were doing, the health of our relationship as we were moving forward, based on your ability to engage with me in whatever the topic was.
Yeah. And as uncomfortable as that can be from time to time, it's so liberating, and it has drawn us so much closer than any romantic relationship that I've ever been in.
Thanks. I feel the same way. So I think a good, not obviously on the first date, but I think a good icebreaker, especially if you're serious about someone, and I think it shows a lot of intentionality if you can do this, is to broach that conversation by saying, hey, I want to move forward into healthy relationships, and I'd like the beginning of this to be healthy and start off on a good foot. So here's some things that I want to talk about. Here's how I'm showing up. Here's how I want to show up. Here's some things I know in my past that kind of are my Achilles heel, so to speak, that hinder me from showing up the way I want to, but I want to work on those. Yeah. And if you can engage in a conversation with that other person right there at the outset, I mean, that's huge.
Yeah, I feel like we've kind of put to bed some of our trust issues as we've gone on through our relationship, and it's really comforting, and it allows us to grow in our individuality, like we've talked about before, as far as go off and do, what you love. Go hunting or do this and that. I don't feel like I got to check, is he really hunting? Where is he really? And just that comfort in doing your own thing, and is really a wonderful thing.
Absolutely. Yeah, I was in a past relationship where it was as bad as like they wanted to know passwords to like accounts because it was just this sense of mistrust. That's just toxic. I mean, that's
Yeah. And ironically enough, didn't that person break the trust in your all's relationship? So
yeah.
sometimes people
Yeah.
are projecting
There is,
when
right?
when they're super overly.
Mm-hmm.
I don't even have
Yeah,
the
so
word
many-
for it.
Yep, so many keys or warning signs.
Yeah.
It's so important to always take a temperature reading of where the relationship's at, whether it's new or it's progressing. So one thing I'll say you've been tremendous at is like you've always been really good at wanting to spur conversation and talking about just talking. Like you've bought these little I won't say workbooks, but little cards that might have a question that initiate conversations. Where if you're just sitting there at dinner or if you're at home just relaxing, you can pull these little cards out, and it may be a question about anything.
Well, it can bring up topics that you don't really necessarily think to talk about, but that can definitely bring you closer to one another and dig in deeper to who your partner is.
Mm-hmm.
Is why I think those are good.
Yeah, and again, it's just all about every day you have to take some step to initiate the building of trust.
Right.
And I think a lot of times we unintentionally put that responsibility on the other person. Meaning, for example, if I'm feeling a lack of trust in a relationship, then I may have an expectation for you to do something or say something or be open about something or whatever,
Mm-hmm.
And that is, I honestly think that's destructive. I think trust starts with you.
It does, but it's also like a double-edged sword. There are certain expectations that are essential to being met within your relationship. You know what I'm saying?
No, I do, but I guess my point is that if you're going to foster communication and about trust, then it needs to begin with me. So, for example,
Yes.
I need to be taking the lead, and if it's if I have an issue with
And open that door of
that's right.
communication about it, for sure.
if I have an issue, like if, for example, if I have an issue, if I think if one of my big concerns is that you're texting somebody on the phone when you shouldn't be, I'm just bringing up something. Instead of me saying, "What are you doing?" Like, show me this, da 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 da. It's rather like, "Hey, let me share with you who I was talking to today." And this, these are the conversations I had. Not that you have to throw everything out and have everything completely open for inspection. That's not what I mean. But if you model that behavior, I guess is what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Then I think it does two things. One, it helps you feel more secure in your own, and it helps show the other person that they can be just
Absolutely.
as open.
Yeah.
I think that's a much better approach to trying to build trust than I've done in my own relationships in the past, and I've seen is we expect the other person to do something that will build our trust.
Yeah, the unspoken expectations. When I referred to expectations earlier, I meant something that you and your partner set down, certain boundaries you have in your relationship, and that's totally acceptable as long as you communicate about it and you're both on the same page. But these unsaid expectations that are what get us in trouble when we assume someone should react or behave a certain way, and then they don't.
Right. Yeah, that goes back to the big relationship killer, right? Unmet expectations. So as you look at our relationship, what are some of the things that for you continue to build trust or enforce this sense of trust that you have in me? I mean, are there any things that kind of jump out?
I mean, I just feel like you're always open with me. And if just little things like an old female friend reaches out or whatever, you mention it, you bring it up like, oh, hey, so-and-so, and, text today or whatever. And it takes the fear and mystery out of it, because if you omit certain things and then, like, say I find out about it later, it automatically feels like something maybe is not good's going on because of my past. And you know that. So, like, you're very open with, hey, so-and-so reached out and she wanted to wish me a happy birthday, which is totally fine. Now, nightly conversations as friends, that's a boundary for me with female friends. You don't need to be talking to them every day or talking about our relationship. That's the boundaries I'm talking about. But we're open about what we're comfortable with and what we're not.
Yeah, that's a really big one. Is I think you talk about baggage, bringing in, not that past relationships or friendships are baggage, but we tend to bring those into our relationship as well. So to that point, you and I didn't meet when we were in 8th grade, and we had a whole life
Right.
of collecting, accumulating experiences, accumulating friendships.
Lots of experiences for you.
Right.
No.
Yeah. No, I agree with you. But all that, so, I wasn't going to jettison all the friends that I had, nor I feel
should
like,
you.
Right.
Yeah.
But there are a number of female friends, and that can, and that can feel threatening. And conversely, you had male friends. So you have to deal with that. I mean, it has to be, it absolutely needs to be dealt with.
And that's why it's so good to be open and honest about every little thing, and don't assume, oh, they're not going to like this, so I'm going to keep it a secret from them.
Right.
Because then there goes that trust starts crumbling away, and and little nicks at it over and over again, and it's gone before you know it.
Yep.
And then you find yourself in a very unhappy relationship.
Yeah.
If you cannot trust your partner.
Yeah, there were some friendships that I have had, some a lifetime, some not that long, were females. Some were just friendships, some were just platonic. Some of them, there may have been history in the past, but they were all there. So coming into this relationship with you, we needed to take another look at those. I needed to take another look at those and say, hey, which ones have kind of run their cycle and the season's over, that maybe don't best serve the relationship you and I have.
And if you sit down and discuss them or whatever, or go through them with your partner, and they're uncomfortable with them, what's more important to you?
Right. Right. Exactly. And it takes a lot. Talking about trust, it takes a lot of trust to be able to sit down and have these conversations openly and objectively.
And listen and not get defensive.
Well, that's it.
It's so easy to get defensive very quickly.
You remember when we were in school, the old projectors when they had the transparency and they throw something up on the board, right? So they'd lay something down and they talk about it, and then they overlay it, and then you show more of a picture. Well, it's a great metaphor for relationships, where we're talking. You might be having a conversation with somebody, but then you overlay a fear or something of your own onto that conversation, a situation, and it colors it completely different. That's okay as long as you're aware of it and you talk about it. So there have been some relationships that I've brought into our marriage that some have changed, some didn't change, some were perfectly fine, and you've become really good friends with them too. There's going to be those. There's going to be other ones that are threatening, and you really have to ask yourself, a great person, but did they bring that? What is there more value, or is there more potential issues by continuing that?
Yeah, it's a delicate balance. I mean,
It
we're not
is.
saying ixnay all your opposite sex friends.
No.
But there's
You
definitely
can't
a
ignore it
balance.
either. Like, oh, it's fine.
No, because it can damage your relationship.
Yeah. And I definitely was of the mindset when I met you, and again, it had everything to do with a lot of the things I was bringing in, but like I was I had met you. I was really excited. I wanted this to go forward, but at the same time, I was trying to kind of hold on to the sense of my individuality and my own voice that it took a long time to recapture over the years. And so,
And I was like that too, because
Yeah.
I had never had this separate self and individuality. And then like, I felt like I had a little bit and I didn't want to let that go.
Right. Yeah. And it was like a kid with a toy. I was like, I'm not going to let this go. I'm not going to give this up. But as I became more and more convinced that I wanted to see where this relationship was going, that I was serious, then I was like, okay, well, they're kind of coming together, and you had to deal with them. I had to address them.
Yeah.
Right? And because you were willing to address them with me, over time we were able to find our path forward, and
Yeah.
vice versa too.
Yeah. And it was kind of a little shakeup for us to remind us that we had something special and we needed to protect that as well.
Absolutely. And what was counterintuitive to me was, like trying to hold on to something and not let it go and not make allowances for it and kind of having a line drawn in the sand only created more tension.
Mm-hmm.
The counterintuitive part was when I let go of it and we're able to look at it and address it in a trust-based environment.
And see it for what it really was,
See it for
and
what it
not what the
was.
other person's assumptions were.
In actuality, that actually gave more, and not only did it allowed me to maintain my individuality, but it even fostered more growth there. So, and I think with you too, and that's a great part of that's. I think what's one of the great outcomes of trust is solid trust means you can be who you are as an individual. I can be who I am as an individual. We're not trying to control each other. You have your life, I have my life. It's all combined. But
Yeah.
if you're going to take off for a week with your girlfriends to go do something and have fun, that's great. And I don't need to be in a situation where I feel worried or threatened because I
Yeah.
know how you're going to show up,
Right.
right?
Yeah, that's so powerful.
Yeah, it's not a matter of some guy when you're on a trip somewhere and some guy tries to come on to you. That's going to happen. That's just life. I need to be aware of that. The difference is how you respond to
Yeah,
it.
you
right?
have to
And
have that
vice
trust
versa.
in your partner of how
Right.
they'll respond.
Mm-hmm. And as you build that trust and as you become comfortable in it and it grows and becomes a stronger pillar, boy, the freedom of, I don't know, just the freedom that you have in a relationship it's a beautiful thing. As we wrap up this conversation about trust, I would say to anybody, I like to say, what would I tell my son or my younger self if I could go back and say, on the topic of trust, I would say a number of things. One, trust yourself, trust your gut, trust your intuition first and foremost, and don't make any apologies for that. Secondly, understand where your weak points are. Understand where your failure points are. Understand the areas that you do have distrust in or vulnerability in, and be willing to be open about it. And be consistent with that.
Yeah, consistency is key. And I would say talk about problems right when they show their face. Don't hold things in.
I'm laughing because I know that for a long time that was
Yeah.
I show up as like, I want to fix it. I want to talk about it right now. I want to know everything that's going on. Let's get it all on the table. Let's fix it so we can have a great night and breathe easy.
Yeah, sometimes I have to process a
Right,
little,
right.
but I'm good. If I do need more process time, I'll tell you.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
I've
we can
learned that.
dig deeper in it tomorrow. This is what's bothering me. I need to process this a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, just we keep going back to communication, but it's so key. And don't omit things. Omitting feels like lying to your partner.
Yeah.
So you need to be transparent and open.
Yep. I'm sure we're going to touch on this more because those two, I don't know if it's a three-legged stool, the metaphor, but trust and communication are definitely two of the main pillars
Yeah.
for any successful relationship.
And you and I don't have it all figured out. you know,
Well, I
these
do.
these are all topics that ebb and flow, and that
Yeah.
and that we have to check ourselves
Yeah.
and try to stay adamant about and you know doing what we preach.
Mhm.
We know how important it is, but it is something that you have to constantly work on in your relationship.
It is, and to that point, I know we've talked a lot about these things in the context of a new relationship, but the reality is they need to be just as important or more important in an existing relationship. So I would encourage anybody, whether they've been together 2 weeks or 20 years, if this hasn't been a priority, or if it hasn't been front of mind, if you've just as a couple just taken a casual approach to this, I'd say, hey, start today. Get with your significant other and say, let's talk about trust and let's talk about communication. You don't have to start anywhere in particular. Just say, hey, let's dive into this a little bit and see where we both are. What fears do we have? What hesitancies do we have?
Because that's going to change over the years. The
It is.
relationship constantly grows and changes and expands, and those topics and points of interest are going to change.
Mhm. I mean, there's 1,000 things you could Google for free as little icebreakers or ways to start the
Just
conversation.
follow Sergeant Squared.
Or just,
We have
or
all the
just-
answers, right?
well, you do. I'm winging it.
Yeah.
But I think that's the key. Just like exercise, or just like dieting, or just like preparing for a physical event, it's that discipline, everyday consistency. Make it a part of your life.
Yeah.
Start out.
It's so easy, and it'll enrich your relationship.
It will.
It really does.
It will. Yep. Whether it's in your relationship or whether it's a business associate or your boss or your children, doesn't matter. Your friends, it's going to make you a richer person, and it's just going to. We've seen it in our lives. It's just going to blossom all those important relationships in your life, and it will, through attrition, remove the ones that don't need to be in your life.
Right.
No?
Yeah.
So, excellent.
Yeah. Nice little takeaway there, Mr. Sergeant, and all
I
your
really
wisdom.
have a lot more trust in you now that we've had this conversation.
Good.
I love you.
I love you too.